Okay. So today we're going to do summaries of the chapters from the Devi book by Ramesh Menon. And we're at chapter 11. And that's the chapter where King Janamejaya wanted to know, who is this boy Astika? Because remember, Astika came in and disrupted King Janamajaya's Sarpa Yagya, where he was killing all the snakes. And Astika came in, and he was such a shining, beautiful being that King Janamejaya said, "Oh, it's so wonderful to have you. Ask any boon of me and I'll give it to you." And Astika said, "Then stop this yagya." And so it was because he was related to the serpents, so he wanted him to stop that. So now chapter 11 is about Vedavyasa telling him, who is this Astika? And it turns out that there was a great rishi, and his name was Jaratkara or Karu. And his elder relatives, or his fathers and forefathers, wanted him to have a son. And so he said, well, if it's easy, I'll marry somebody. And if she promises to always obey me, I'll marry her. And so just so happens that Vasuki, one of the serpents, actually, you might remember this serpent, because when they were churning the ocean, it was he that they used to churn the ocean back and forth, the demons and the devas, to get the nectar out of the ocean, the Amrit. And so Vasuki's sister was named Jaratkaru, or something similar to or maybe the same name. And so anyway, so he had her take the form of a beautiful woman, and they got married. And but then she woke him when one day when he was sleeping during sunset, which is a very holy time for prayers. And so she was all in a tizzy about, shall I wake him? But he told me not to wake him. And I know if I disobey him, he will leave me. But on the other hand, if he misses his prayers at this time, apparently that's a great sin also. So she went ahead and woke him. And he said, go. But she was already pregnant with the son's wife, or in a sense that they actually got married. So she went back and lived with her brother and had this beautiful son, Astika. And that's who came and disrupted his yagya. And then in chapter 12, Vedavyasa is being asked by Janamejaya to tell him more about this beautiful divine mother. Who is she? And and he says, I had thought that Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva are the gods who create, preserve, and destroy the universe. Is there any other beyond that? The three, aren't they eternal? So that question, which we've heard many times throughout the Devi Bhagavatam, is there somebody higher than Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva? And of course, Vyasa says with a smile, once I walked along on the banks of the Ganga, I saw Narada Muni sat plunged in meditation, and I approached him softly, this son of Brahma, and waited for him to come out of his meditation. And he said, when he came out of his meditation, he said, Vyasa, your face is bursting with a question in your heart. Tell me what it is. And so Vyasa asked that same question. Master, who is the origin of the infinite universe? Where does this Brahmanda come from? And some of the wise say Shiva, others say Vishnu, and yet others are certain it's Brahma. Then there are all the other gods as well. Then, my lord, excuse me, there are also bhaktas of the Devi who insist that she is the pristine creatrix. So he asked them, please tell me. And Narada said to me, smiling, so there's always story inside of story inside of story, right? So Janamejaya asked Vedavyasa. Vedavyasa said, oh, I had that same question. So I asked it of Narada. And then Narada, this is Narada's answer to Vedavyasa. Narada says to Vedavyasa, smiling, Vyasa, once I too was tormented by this same confusion and took my doubt to my father. So he's a son of Brahma. And so Brahma said to me, only the unattached know the answer to the ultimate mystery. Once when the universe lay dissolved in the primal sea, Vishnu lay plunged in sleep on the serpent bed. So we remember that story. And Brahma comes out of a golden lotus sprouted from Vishnu's navel. And then Madhu and Kataiba, the two demons, come out of Vishnu's ear and they want to fight with him. But after, I don't know, before or after, when he sat in tapasya for 1,000 years, Brahma, and then when he, then all of a sudden he heard a voice speak to him and said, create. And he wondered what he must create. And that's when Madhu and Kataiba appeared trying to kill him. But once Vishnu subdued him, he still didn't quite know how he was going to create anything because they're on this huge sea. So after some time, Shiva came out of the eyebrow of Vishnu. Suddenly the sky above was lit with a blinding radiance, and the three of us saw an exquisite Devi who appeared within that light. She said to us in her entirely lovely voice, now create, sustain, and destroy the universe until the next kalpa ends. But we asked, Mother, how shall we create when there are no elements to create from? There's no earth, fire, water, or air, but only this endless sea. And the Devi smiled, and shimmering, all of a sudden, so you remember, a shimmering ship comes down, or like an airplane type thing, but it's celestial airplane, we'll call it. Suddenly it came down, and they were told to get in it, and up it went, and in a moment they were coming down, and they saw that there was a whole creation below them that they didn't recognize. So here they were supposed to create, and yet there was already something going on. And so they knew that that was very strange. But then it got even stranger as they went down one time. And who did they see? They saw Brahma. But Brahma was in the airplane. And so they all looked at Brahma, and Brahma was sort of sweating. And they said, who's that? And he said, I don't know. He said, at this moment, I don't even know who I am. But they did the same thing. They went into Vishnu Loka, and they went to Kailash and saw other Brahmas and Kailashes. And then they ended up at Manidvipa. So that's the beautiful island of gems where the Divine Mother lived. And so their ship landed there, and they were all confused and disoriented. And now they're suddenly on this most beautiful island in the whole creation, of course. And as they got out of their ship, they realized they should go and be with Mother. But as they're coming closer, all three of them are turned into women, because apparently only women surround the Mother on Manidvipa. So they all had saris on and they're all looking quite beautiful. But they went into Manidweepa, and it says the Devi Bhuvaneshwari was sat there with a smile on her lip, and two of her four hands held a noose and a goad, and the others were raised in mudras of protection and blessing. This is once again Brahma, we three, Brahma, Vishnu, and Mahesh, who create, nourish, and destroy the universe, had never seen or even dreamt of such beauty as hers. Why, we realized that the birds in that blessed place sang the occult mantra Hrim, which belongs to the lady whose skin is the color of the rising sun in her youth's lush bloom, and who is merciful past understanding. Vishnu, Shiva, and I, since Brahma is still telling the story to his son Narada, had never seen the Devi Bhagavati before, and we stood transfixed by her beauty, wondering who she was and what she was called. Even as we gazed at her, suddenly she was transformed. The ineffable young woman stood before us with infinite eyes and infinite limbs. Then Vishnu whispered, "It is the Devi Bhagavati, the mother of all, the Mula Prakriti. She is the Satchitananda. Look, the Shaktis and Vibhutis surround her. I saw her upon the primordial sea as I floated there on the banyan leaf as a child when the Kalpa began. She sang softly to me, I remember, like a mother to her child. It was the song of the universe. Let us approach the mother. She wants us to, else we would not be there." So then they bowed at her feet and heard her laugh softly. We soon realized why. In her crimson toenails, we saw the universe, and that was just the beginning of all the visions we saw in the Devi's presence. We were lost in the wonder for 100 years, for we saw not just this universe, but countless others. Then we sang hymns to the Devi, and she gave and said, "Bhavani, we have forgotten the Mula mantra we have had from you. If you are to create, nurture, and destroy the universe in this kalpa as well, please give us that mantra again." And she gave it to us once more from her own lips. She said gently, "Shakti enlivens the Purusha. You will have need of your Shaktis before you begin the universe again." And from her own body, she created the three Devis, who are the consort of Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva throughout the Manvantaras. She came to us herself as Saraswati, Lakshmi, and Uma. And when we saw those three goddesses, we felt inspired. We knew we could begin our universe again. The Devi and her mantaba all vanished around us. Just her mantra echoed softly everywhere, like the very air of the Manidweepa. And we three gods were male again. Saraswati, Lakshmi, and Uma were with us now, and we climbed back in our crystal ship. It lifted away from the jewel isle with a sigh, and with as swift as thinking, we were back at the primordial sea, the endless sea. And we were ready to begin our great task, for we now knew who the origin of all things was, whom we must worship. So that's Brahma telling Narada, who then told Vedavyasa, right? So then on chapter 13, they talk about that they all came and did their jobs. So Brahma created, and then Vishnu also made Vaikuntha his home, and Shiva made his home on Kailash. And then it says a little bit the third paragraph on page 57. The wheel of call of time began to turn slowly by the will of the three great gods, Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva. Then Vishnu in Vaikuntha had a vision of the jewel island, the Manidvipa, and he saw the Devi Bhagavati in her temple and heard her Mula mantra again, resounding from everywhere, the seed of all things. Vishnu remembered who it was that had enabled Brahma himself and Shiva to create the worlds, and he decided he would perform a yagya to worship the Devi and to give thanks to her. So he found all the proper rishis and everything, and they had a beautiful yagya. And it says here, when that solemn, elaborate, and original yagya or homa was complete, a voice spoke out of the sky saying, Vishnu, from now on, you will be the first of all the gods. You shall be the savior of the universe and have first worship everywhere. When Dharma decays in the world, you will incarnate yourself to restore it, and your avatars shall be worshipped forever. So I love that story about him just being grateful and wanting to do the fire ceremony to say thank you. So then as the voice faded, all that heard were filled with fervent bhakti for she who had spoken, the Devi Bhagavati, wonderful past describing. Then of course, Janamajaya says, tell me more about the Devi. I feel wondrous peace steal over my spirit as I listen to you, because remember, he was all distraught because he knows his father is not in heaven because he didn't have a proper ceremonies at the end of his life because his body was burnt by the snake venom. So Vedavyasa decides to tell him a story, one of my favorites. Vyasa said, once in Kosala, in the city of Ayodhya, there ruled the noble king Drupasandi. He was a king of Dharma, and Kosala flourished during his reign. And so he has two beautiful wives, Manorama and Lilavati. Manorama had the first baby. His name was Sudarshana, but 1 month later, Lilavati had a child named Shatrajit. Is that his name? I think so. Yeah, Satrajita. So all was good, but it was pretty obvious that the younger, by 1 month, he was more charismatic and more had a glibber tongue, shall we say. And everyone, including the king, it turns out, preferred him to the more quiet Sudarshana. But when they were about 5 years old, the king went out hunting and got killed by a tiger. And as soon as that happened, word flew back to the kingdom, and their guru Mahesha went out and did the final rites right out there in the jungle where he was killed. So and then the ministers, even though they knew that Satyajita was a more favorite one, they knew the Dharma and the rules of the kingdom, in which case the oldest son, Sudarsana, should be crowned the king. And they wanted to do that right away because the people were uneasy. And when that was about to happen, all of a sudden, Lilavati's father arrives. And he had something else to say, in that it doesn't matter what difference does 1 month make. My grandson is obviously the more qualified. Everybody loves him. Where Sudarshana is just, too quiet. He's not the favorite. So, but then of course, Manorama's father, Virasena, arrives and he says, no. My grandson is the oldest. He should be crowned king. So that ended up in a huge dispute, and it actually ended up in a big war between the two of them, which lasted until Virasina's head got chopped off. And he died along with many, many other soldiers. And when that got back to the palace, Manorama knew that she and her grandson and her son, Sudarsana, were not going to be safe because Uttachit would kill her father over this. He certainly would kill her son and her probably just to make the throne safe for his grandson. So she went to the one to what's his name, Vidala, a minister that she trusted. And she said, what shall we do? And he said, you must not stay here, and neither must I. We must flee here. Udajita, before Udajita returns. And he says, I have an uncle. I think this is interesting. Sabahu, who lives in the forest around Varanasi. He has an army and will protect us. Well, he never gets to Sabahu at this point, but because what happened. So on the pretext that Manorama wanted to go out and do the final rites for her father. So she and Vidala and their son Sudarshana went out to the forest where the father was killed. But then they did that, and then they went off right away. But at the banks of the Ganges, before they were going to cross over, they got robbed of everything. So suddenly, Manorama, who had been a queen a little bit ago, suddenly had nothing. They had no chariot, no horses, no anything. So, but the minister still said, we must get across this river. It's the only place we can be safe. So they did some hard journey. And after another hard journey of a whole day, they arrived ragged at the Muni Bharadvaja's ashram in Chitrakoot. And little Sudarsana was grave and clinging to his mother's hand. The Muni saw the beautiful young queen and said to her in some amazement, Devi, why are you here in the jungle and your young son with you? Now all her grief from all this horrible things burst out, and she just began to sob uncontrollably. But the Muni was told by Vidala, the minister, the whole story. And because the man spoke the truth, the Muni Bharadvaja said, stay with us in our ashram. You have nothing to fear here, and I promise you that one day Sudarshana shall be king of Ayodhya. And so the Muni gave Manorama and Sudarshana a kutila to live in, and they remained there in peace with the queen Shakti. Vidala also stayed on in the ashram, for he could not go back to the kingdom. So then, of course, back in Ayodhya, Yudhishthira makes sure that his grandson gets crowned king, and actually most people were quite happy because they really did prefer him. He was much, like I said, much more charismatic. But it says, it says very beautiful, but it was not long. Oh, excuse me. But not everybody was happy. Some people remembered the beautiful Manorama and her son and did not feel comfortable with how this had all turned out at all. And so Yudhishthira went back to his own kingdom, but after a while he just hears that Sudarshana and Manorama are at the ashram in Chitrakoot, and he takes his army there to steal them away and to do them both in. But the Muni is there and protects them. I thought this is a great passage here where Yudhishthira replies to the Muni when he says, you cannot see them, they're under my care. He says, I will not leave without taking them with me. You are a man of peace, Muni. Give them to me peacefully, or I will take them by force. The Muni's eyes glistened. He said in a soft voice, "You know what happened to Suka when he tried to take the sister's cow from that Rishi's ashram with force. I beg you, leave us before I grow angry." The king called his ministers aside and said, "I mustn't leave Manarama and Sudarshana alive. Even the weakest enemies can grow strong in time and become a threat. I have killed Virasena. If I spare Manarama and her son, one day they will surely come for my head and my Shatrajitas. I must take the two of them from here and kill them. There's no soldiers in this old hermit's ashram to prevent me." But his ministers said in alarm, "My lord, never be so rash. The Muni Bharadvaja needs no soldiers to fight us. He can reduce our army to ashes with a look from his eyes. If the Muni protects Manarama and her son, we can do them no harm. Moreover, my lord, Manarama has no wealth of any kind. Her son can never be a threat to us. All this world spins around on the wheel of fate. Be merciful today and polite as well. Ask for the Muni's blessing and let us leave here in peace." Udajita struggled a moment with his Kshatriya, his kingly nature, then fell at the Muni's feet and asked for pardon and blessing, which the kindly Rishi gave. And Udajita went back to his kingdom. So all was okay. But I love that in this book, many times there's instances that the power of tapasya is far stronger than a king with unlimited army. So the story goes on. And it starts with sort of a happenstance thing. The children he was playing with and raised with the Muni's son. So they played all the time as they were getting older. And one time the children was calling out playfully to the minister, plebe, not sure what that exactly means, but Sudarshana, who was a little ways off, what he heard was kling, kling, which is the Mula mantra of Kamadeva. And he didn't know, so he started saying that. And every time he said, he called in his lisping voice and felt the most delicious stirring in his body. Again and again, the child repeated that syllable, never knowing it was the Mula mantra of Kamadeva, who is the god of love. Each time he felt a soft ecstasy within his body. So without being initiated by any guru other than destiny, the little prince Sudarshana acquired a mystic mantra. He would repeat it in his mind whenever he was alone and just before he fell asleep. And that mantra transformed his very nature. Day by day, he grew more brilliant. When Sudarshana was 11, the rishis began to teach him the Vedas. They were astonished at how quickly he mastered the Dharma Shastras. No one knew about the secret power he had gained from repeating the Kamadeva Mula mantra. The once reticent prince became a magnificent archer and scholar. He knew all he needed to know about politics and the moral sciences. He brimmed with quiet assurance. Then one day, while young Sudarsana sat chanting his mantra, the Devi appeared before him in a vision. She was crimson-hued like a Kemsuka flower. She wore a scarlet raiment and great blood-red rubies. He saw her as the Devi Sri Lakshmi, mounted on Garuda with her Vaishnavi Shaktis all around her. The Devi called Sudarshana softly to follow her through the forest to the banks of the Ganges. The prince went without an instant hesitation, and after he had bathed in the great river, the Devi gave him a splendid bow, 2 magic quivers of arrows, and an unearthly coat of mail. Then she raised her hand over him in benediction and vanished. After that, Sudarshana became a fierce bhakti devotee and worshiped the goddess whenever he could, often wandering down to where she had taken him. Now it happened that the king of Kashi had a lovely daughter named Sashikala. So one day the princess sat with her Shakti under the flowering tree, and she saw a Brahmana hurrying along her father's palace. Sashikali stopped the man for fun and cried, "Whither are you coming in such haste, Muni?" And the Muni replies, "Why, from the Rishi Bharadvaja's ashram, princess." Playfully, Shashikali asked, "Tell me of an exceptional thing in the ashram, Muni, the most beautiful thing of all." Without hesitation, the Muni said, "Why, the Prince Sudarshana, princess. Ah, he is handsome past describing, the son of the king of Ayodhya. I would even say," the Brahman went on breathlessly, "that if you haven't seen our prince, your eyes have been giving you in vain. And besides, he is a great archer and a deep scholar too. Well, let me put it thus, lovely Sashikala, our Sudarshana is fit to be your husband." That really stirred things up. And so she fell in love with him just by that description. And then she started praying. She had learned the Saraswati mantra early on. She started praying to the Devi, and the Divine Mother appeared to her in her dreams and said, your dreams will be fulfilled. I promise that you can have him for your husband. But meanwhile, she becomes very challenged because she's in love with somebody she's never seen, and has very little interest in any of the things she used to have interest in. And the king noticed this and decided that it's time for her to get married. So he sets up this big thing called a Swambara, where he invites all the kings and princes of the land to come and check out his daughter, and for her to choose which one she wants. When she heard this happen, she said, "No, don't do this, because I've already given my heart to Sudarsana." And her father said, "Oh, that's ridiculous. He's got no army, no wealth, no nothing. You can't marry that." Meanwhile, all the kings are arriving, and she gets scared. So she sends a messenger to the ashram, the Muni's ashram, and tells Sudarsana, "You must come." And it's a very beautiful part. The message she sent was, "The Devi Bhagavati has ordained that you and I be married. Tomorrow is my Swamvara, O prince. Make sure you are in my father's city tomorrow, or I will kill myself before I become any other man's wife." When Sudarshana heard this message, he prepared to set out for the at once, for an irresistible sense of destiny stirred in him too. The Muni gave him his blessing, but his mother was very upset. "You mustn't go, Yudhishthira will kill you." But her son said serenely, "Mother, what is written must come to pass, and not you nor I can prevent it. But it is the Devi Bhagavati who commands me to attend the Swambara, and I must go." So seeing his determination, she says, "I'll come with you." And so off they rode to King Sabahu's kingdom, who when he saw how in the city, King Sabahu received them with honor. When he saw how splendid was the prince who had grown in the forest, he housed Sudarsana and his mother in a large mansion and had his own servants waiting on them. Meanwhile, Yudhishthira and the other kings hear that this pauper who has nothing has come to the Swayambara, and they're saying that he's really ruined the whole thing. And so they bring him before him. I like this part where they say, "Why are you here?" And he says, they say, "Don't you know that you're not supposed to be here? You don't have an army, you don't have anything." And Sudarshana, with a smile on his face, in a soft voice, he says, "My lords, all that you say is true. I have no kingdom, legions, friends, or wealth. I heard of the Swayamvara and I came to watch it with no special purpose. But my lords, I did not come on my own will, but because the Devi Bhagavati told me to. The Devi, who is my goddess, is all of yours as well. I have no enmity with any of you, but if you decide to make an enemy of me, she who is the cause of all causes, the mother of the universe, will protect me. I only do what she asks of me. My life is in the hands of the one who spins the wheel of fate." But the king says, "What you say is true, but Uttajita means to kill you." Sudarshana laughed. He said, "A man is born into this world by his karma, and by the fate alone does he leave it when his time has come. Not a moment before his time comes can a man be killed by any king or even by the devas. It is only called time who creates and destroys a man. I am a Bhakti la Devi, from whose hands time flows. She protects me, and I fear neither Udachita nor any other man." So I see we're just about at the end of our time. So the fact is that she refuses to marry anybody else. And so her father sees that she's very serious about this and marries them in a beautiful wedding. And then the next morning, when all the kings come, he invites them to come for her wedding breakfast or brunch, whatever it's going to be. And they get furious. And they all go out muttering. And so Udachita and Satyajita are going to block the city gates and keep Sudarshana and Sasikali from leaving the kingdom, which they do. And Sasikali and Sudarshana are going out, and Sabahu comes with them also. And Sudarshana starts intoning the mantra of the mother, the divine mother, and they start walking right into them. And so sure, Udajita and Satyajita start shooting at them and throwing arrows and everything. And then all of a sudden there's a hush, and the divine mother on her lion has appeared, and everybody's wondering. And so everything stops, and Sudarshana said, "Oh, look at Sasikali, mother has come to protect us." But then Udajita says, "What, are we going to let a woman on a lion keep us from doing what we need to do?" And so they go and start attacking Sudarshana again, who responds for a while, and then the divine mother comes, and she's the one who actually shoots all of the arrows at Udajita and Satyajita and cuts off their heads. And then everybody's bowing to the divine mother, and Sudarshana and his wife and mama go back to Ayodhya, where all the people are extremely happy, actually, to receive their new king. And that's such a beautiful story of faith in the divine mother. So, Jai Mahamaya ki jai, Mother Durga Mata ki jai. Any questions or?
I love happy endings.
It is a happy ending, and I love the ones that show how mother, the faith that we have is really authentic. Anything else? So are you getting to slowly learn the stories, Milvi and Elaine, a bit more as you hear them over and over and over again? Yeah.
Who's Uma?
I said, what?
Who is Uma?
Uma is another name for the consort of Shiva. So, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
many-
when they mention things, it rings a bell with me, but I could never recall all the names and everything that happened.
And a lot of times when I read, I try to keep the same name. Like there's so many names for Lord Vishnu, but I keep trying to just say Vishnu,
Mhm.
because it can get extremely confusing. Yeah. So,
Especially when
But
you
you
read,
must,
especially what?
when you read the big book.
Exactly. The huge Devi Bhagavatam. Were you saying something, Elaine?
well, you must know what the other names are though, right?
Many of them, like Narayana and different names like that. But there's so many. I mean, there's 1,008 names of the Divine Mother, so it's hard to
Oh
know
my
them all.
gosh.
And probably that many of, I know there's at least 108 names of Shiva, probably that many at least for Vishnu as well. So,
Yeah, that's why it's so confusing.
like I said, that's how I try to keep it a little bit simpler. Okay, well,
That's why we're doing this.
exactly.
Yeah.
He does make it simpler, but so now we're going to turn to Mahesha, the Great Ego, this week coming up. So I'll be reading those. And we'll meet again. Well, I'm going to read the stories from here,
Oh, okay.
and then probably next week I'll explain part of the stories from the Chandipat.
Okay.